The telegram arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in September of 1881, and Olivia Kane held it in trembling hands as she read the words that promised her a future she had stopped believing possible after her father's ranch went under and left her with nothing but debts and a drafty house in Hawthorne, Nevada. Marcus Holloway had courted her through letters for 6 months, his words honeyed and reassuring, speaking of his successful mining investments and the comfortable home he would provide. He had visited twice, bringing flowers and expensive gifts that seemed extravagant, but confirmed everything he claimed about his prosperity. Now he was coming to marry her in 3 weeks, and Olivia could finally stop lying awake at night wondering how she would pay the creditors circling like vultures around what remained of her father's legacy. She pressed the telegram to her chest and walked to the window overlooking the dusty main street of Hawthorne, watching the handful of people going about their business in the harsh afternoon sun. The town sat in the high desert of western Nevada, surrounded by mountains that turned purple in the evening light. It was beautiful in its own stark way, but beauty did not fill an empty stomach or keep the bank from seizing property. Behind her, the door opened and her younger sister Charlotte entered carrying a basket of mending. "Another letter from your intended," a telegram. "He arrives on the 28th. Olivia turned from the window, forcing brightness into her voice. "We will be married on the 30th. He has already arranged everything with Reverend Walsh." Charlotte set down the basket, her expression troubled. "Do you love him, Livy?" The question struck something raw inside Olivia's chest. Love seemed like a luxury she could not afford. "I respect him. He is kind in his letters." "That is enough." "Is it?" Charlotte was only 19, 3 years younger than Olivia, but sometimes her eyes held a wisdom that made her seem older. Mama married Papa for love. Even when everything fell apart, they had that. And it did not save them when the fever came. Olivia heard the sharpness in her own voice and softened it. "I am sorry. I know you worry for me, but Marcus offers security. A future. Those are gifts I cannot refuse." Charlotte said nothing more, but her silence spoke volumes as she returned to her mending. The days passed in a blur of preparation. Olivia cleaned the house until it gleamed, prepared her modest trousseau, and tried to ignore the growing knot of anxiety in her stomach. She told herself it was normal nervousness, that every bride felt this uncertainty before stepping into a new life with a man she barely knew. On the 26th, 2 days before Marcus was scheduled to arrive, Olivia was returning from the general store when a man on horseback nearly collided with her at the corner of Main Street and Silver Avenue. She stumbled backward, packages tumbling from her arms, and strong hands caught her shoulders to steady her. "My apologies, madam. Are you hurt?" She looked up into a face weathered by sun and wind, with eyes the color of desert sage and dark hair that needed cutting. He was younger than she first thought, probably close to her own age, with the lean build of someone who spent long hours in the saddle. His clothes were worn but clean, and he wore his gun low on his hip like someone who knew how to use it. "I am fine," she said, stepping back. "Thank you." He crouched to gather her scattered packages, and she noticed the way he moved with an easy grace despite the evident strength in his frame. When he straightened and handed her the parcels, she saw his eyes linger on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Sebastian Ashford," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "I am new to Hawthorne, just hired on as foreman at the Silver Canyon Ranch. Olivia Kane." She took the packages, acutely aware of the warmth where his fingers had brushed hers. "Welcome to Hawthorne, Mr. Ashford." "Call me Sebastian, please." His voice was low and rough, like gravel smoothed by water. "I hope I will see you again, Miss Kane, under less hazardous circumstances." There was something in his smile that made her heart do an unfamiliar flutter, and she found herself smiling back before she caught herself. Perhaps it is a small town. She hurried home, irritated with herself for the way her pulse raced. She was engaged to be married in 4 days. She had no business noticing the color of a stranger's eyes, or the way his voice sent shivers down her spine. But that night, she dreamed of sage-green eyes and strong hands catching her before she fell, and woke feeling guilty and confused. The next day, she was hanging laundry in the backyard when she heard Charlotte's voice calling her from the house. She wiped her hands on her apron and went inside to find her sister in the kitchen with Sebastian Ashford standing awkwardly near the door, hat in his hands. "Mr. Ashford says he needs to speak with you," Charlotte said, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Something urgent." Olivia felt a flash of annoyance. "I cannot imagine what business we could have, Mr. Ashford. We only just met yesterday." "I know, and I apologize for the intrusion." He glanced at Charlotte, then back at Olivia. "But what I have to say is important, and private if you would allow it." Charlotte looked ready to protest, but Olivia nodded. "Wait in the parlor, Charlotte. We will leave the door open for propriety." When her sister had reluctantly departed, Olivia crossed her arms and regarded Sebastian with a mixture of wariness and something she refused to name. "Well," he stepped closer, his expression grave. "After I met you yesterday, I was in the Lucky Dollar Saloon having a drink. I overheard a conversation that concerns you directly, Miss Kane. Your fiancé, Marcus Holloway." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "How do you know about Marcus?" "I asked around after I left you. Wanted to know if you were spoken for." He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "The barkeep mentioned you were engaged to a man from Virginia City, coming here to marry you. Said his name was Marcus Holloway." "What of it?" Her voice came out sharper than she intended. Sebastian's jaw tightened. "Last night, 2 men came into the saloon. They were deep in their cups and talking loud. One of them mentioned Holloway by name. Said he had a scheme going, sweet-talking some ranch owner's daughter in Hawthorne who was about to inherit property and savings. Said Holloway planned to marry her, get control of her assets, and disappear back to Virginia City with everything she had." The words hit like physical blows. Olivia gripped the back of the nearest chair, her knuckles white. "That is a serious accusation. I know. That is why I had to tell you." Sebastian took another step closer, and she could see the genuine concern in his eyes. "They described you, Miss Kane. Dark hair, pretty face, dead father who owned a ranch. They laughed about how easy it would be, how desperate you must be to trust a man you barely know. Get out." The words came out as a whisper. "Miss Kane, I know this is hard to hear, but get out." She rounded on him, fury and humiliation burning through her veins. "You know nothing about me or my situation. How dare you come into my home and spread vicious gossip about a man you have never met?" Sebastian did not move. "I have no reason to lie to you. I gain nothing from this except your anger, which I am clearly receiving. But I could not stand by and let you walk into a trap without warning you first. Why would you care what happens to me? We are strangers." Something flickered in his eyes, something raw and honest. "Because when I saw you yesterday, I thought you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. And when I learned you were engaged, I was disappointed but accepted it. But when I heard those men talking, describing how Holloway plans to rob you blind and leave you with nothing, I knew I had to warn you, even if you hate me for it." Olivia stared at him, her mind racing. Everything he said sounded insane, impossible. But somewhere deep in her gut, a voice whispered that it made a terrible kind of sense. Marcus's courtship had been so smooth, so perfect. He had asked all the right questions about her father's estate, the property holdings, the remaining assets. She had thought he was being thorough, making sure he could provide for her properly. What if he had been calculating exactly how much she was worth? Who were these men? She asked quietly. I did not catch their names, but they were rough types, miners by the look of them. One had a scar across his nose, the other wore a brown vest with silver buttons, and they specifically mentioned Marcus Holloway, by name, multiple times. Said he had done this before in California, married a widow and cleaned out her accounts before vanishing. Said he was too clever to get caught because he always moved to new territory. Olivia sank into the chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. I have nothing left to steal. The ranch is mortgaged. The debts exceed the assets. If what you say is true, he will be sorely disappointed. Are you certain of that? No savings, no property free and clear. She thought of her mother's jewelry, the small account she had managed to protect from creditors by keeping it in her name alone, the deed to the house itself which was separate from the ranch property. Together it amounted to perhaps $3,000, a fortune to someone like her but hardly worth an elaborate con, unless he was targeting multiple women. Unless she was just one of several marks. The thought made her feel sick. Sebastian crouched beside her chair, his voice gentle. I am sorry. I know this is not what you wanted to hear, but you deserve the truth before you tie yourself to this man, before he has legal right to everything you own. She looked at him, this stranger who had upended her world, and saw only sincerity in his face. Why do you care so much, truly? He reached out as if to take her hand, then stopped himself. Because I have been drifting for a long time, Miss Kane, working ranches, moving from place to place, and in all that time I never once felt like stopping. Not until I saw you on that street corner and something in me said this is it, this is where you are meant to be. I know it sounds foolish. We only just met. But I could not live with myself if I let you be hurt when I had the power to prevent it. Tears stung her eyes. And what am I supposed to do? He arrives tomorrow. The wedding is in 3 days. I have already sent announcements. You investigate, you ask questions. You demand proof of his claims before you marry him. Sebastian's voice was firm. You protect yourself, Miss Kane. Because no one else is going to do it for you. Charlotte appeared in the doorway, her face pale. I was listening. I am sorry, but I was listening. And Livy, you know I never trusted him. Something always felt wrong about how quickly he wanted to marry you, how he never wanted you to visit Virginia City first to see his home. Olivia closed her eyes. Her sister was right. She had explained away all the little inconsistencies, desperate for the security Marcus promised. Desperate enough to ignore her own instincts. What do I do? She whispered. Sebastian stood. First, you do not confront him directly. Men like that can be dangerous when cornered. Second, you send a telegram to Virginia City. Ask about his business there, his reputation. See what comes back. And third, she looked up at him. Third, you let me help you. I may be a stranger, but I have dealt with confidence men before. I know how they operate. He met her gaze steadily. Let me be there when he arrives. Let me watch his reactions when you ask him questions. I can tell if he is lying. It was madness to trust this man she did not know over the one she was supposed to marry. But something in Sebastian's eyes made her feel safe in a way Marcus's honeyed letters never had. All right, she said softly. Help me. The next day was a flurry of activity. Olivia sent 3 telegrams to Virginia City, addressed to the courthouse, the main bank, and the newspaper office. She asked simple questions about Marcus Holloway's mining investments and business reputation. Then she waited, trying to appear normal while her stomach churned with anxiety. Sebastian stopped by in the afternoon with an excuse about asking directions to a ranch supply store, but really to check on her. They spoke briefly on the porch, careful to maintain propriety, but Olivia found herself grateful for his presence. He had a steadiness about him that calmed her racing thoughts. "Whatever happens, you will get through this," he told her quietly. "You are stronger than you know." She wanted to believe him. Marcus arrived on the evening train, precisely on schedule. He was exactly as Olivia remembered, tall and handsome with slicked hair and expensive clothes. He swept her into his arms on the station platform and kissed her cheek, calling her darling and telling her how he had counted every mile until they were reunited. Olivia smiled and said the right things, but inside she was watching him with new eyes, looking for cracks in the facade. They had dinner at the hotel restaurant, and Marcus was attentive and charming, ordering wine and telling amusing stories about his journey. But when Olivia mentioned she had sent telegrams to Virginia City to let his business associates know about the wedding, she saw something flicker in his eyes, just for a second, something cold and calculating. "That was not necessary, darling," he said smoothly. "I already informed everyone who needed to know." "I thought they might want to send congratulations," she said lightly, "or perhaps someone might want to make the journey for the ceremony. My associates are not the sentimental type." He changed the subject quickly, asking about the house and the remaining property. His questions were casual, but Olivia noticed how he kept steering the conversation back to finances and assets. Sebastian had been right. The realization settled over her like a heavy blanket, smothering and undeniable. This man did not love her. He had never loved her. She was a transaction, a means to an end. That night, she lay awake in her room and let herself cry, not for Marcus, but for the dream she had built around him. The safety he represented, the future he promised. All of it was a lie, and she was back where she started, alone and frightened and trying to figure out how to survive. The next morning, Charlotte shook her awake with urgent hands. "Livy, wake up. The telegrams came back, all 3 of them." Olivia stumbled out of bed and followed her sister downstairs. 3 yellow papers lay on the kitchen table, and she picked them up with shaking hands. The first was from the courthouse. No record of mining claims or business filings for Marcus Holloway. The second was from the bank. No account holder by that name, no known business dealings. The third was from the newspaper. Advise caution. Man matching that description suspected in confidence scheme involving widow in Sacramento last year. Never prosecuted but left town hastily. Olivia sat down hard in the nearest chair. "It is all true. Every word Sebastian said." "What are you going to do?" Charlotte asked. Before Olivia could answer, there was a knock at the door. Charlotte answered it and returned with Sebastian, who took one look at Olivia's face and understood immediately. "The telegrams confirmed it," he asked quietly. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Sebastian pulled up a chair and sat across from her. "Then we need a plan. The wedding is tomorrow. He will expect you to go through with it. If you simply call it off, he might become aggressive, try to intimidate you, or worse." "What do you suggest?" Olivia forced herself to focus. This was no time to fall apart. "We turn it back on him. Set a trap." Sebastian's eyes were hard. "Make him think everything is going according to his plan, but have the sheriff ready to arrest him when he shows his true colors." "On what charge? He has not actually done anything illegal yet." "There is an outstanding warrant for him in California if he is the same man. And if we can get him to confess, to say something incriminating, we can hold him while the authorities sort it out." Sebastian leaned forward. "But it requires you to be brave. To face him one more time and play along until we have what we need." Olivia thought of her father, who had worked himself into an early grave trying to save the ranch. Of her mother, who had died heartbroken when it all fell apart anyway. Of Charlotte, who deserved better than to watch her sister be victimized by a con man. "Tell me what to do," she said. They spent the rest of the morning planning. Sebastian went to speak with Sheriff Dawson, an older man who had known Olivia's father and was sympathetic to her situation. The sheriff agreed to be present at the wedding, ready to intervene if needed. Sebastian also enlisted two of his fellow ranch hands, trustworthy men who could provide backup if Marcus tried anything dangerous. Olivia played her part perfectly. When Marcus came to call that afternoon, she was all smiles and excited chatter about the ceremony the next day. She mentioned that she needed to visit the bank in the morning to close out her account and withdraw everything to give to him after the wedding for safekeeping. She watched his eyes light up with greed and felt disgust curl in her stomach. "You do not have to do that, darling," he said, but his voice was eager. "I am happy to manage our finances together." "I want you to have it all," she said sweetly. "I want to start our marriage with complete trust." He kissed her hand, and she had to force herself not to recoil. That evening, Sebastian came to the back door after Marcus had left. Olivia stepped out onto the porch, grateful for the cool night air after the stifling performance she had given. "You did well," Sebastian said. "He suspects nothing." "I feel filthy," she admitted. "Lying to him even though he deserves it. You are protecting yourself. There is no shame in that." Sebastian was quiet for a moment, then added softly, "I am sorry your wedding day is being ruined like this. It was never a real wedding. Just another con." She looked up at the stars scattered across the dark sky. "I thought I was being practical, choosing security over romance, but I was just being a fool. You were trying to survive. That does not make you a fool." She turned to look at him, this man who had appeared in her life like some kind of guardian angel. In the lamplight spilling from the kitchen window, his face was all strong lines and shadows, but his eyes were warm with concern. "Why are you really helping me, Sebastian? And do not tell me it is just because you think I am pretty. Men do not append their lives for a woman they met 3 days ago." He was silent for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he said, "My mother was conned by a man like Holloway when I was 14. He married her, took everything she had and disappeared. She never recovered, died a few years later still broken by what he had done to her." His voice was rough with old pain. "I swore I would never let that happen to anyone else if I had the power to stop it. And then I met you and I saw a chance to make good on that promise." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "I am so sorry. It was a long time ago." He looked at her, and she saw yearning in his face. "But I was not lying when I said I thought you were beautiful. Or when I said something in me recognized you as important the moment we met. I know the timing is terrible, and you have every reason not to trust your judgment about men right now. But when this is over, when Holloway is behind bars and you are safe, I would very much like the chance to court you properly, if you will have me." Her heart stuttered in her chest. "You want to court me, even knowing I am broke, that I come with nothing but debts and a half-ruined house. I want to court you because you are brave and strong and you love your sister enough to marry a stranger to protect her, because you deserve to be cherished, not used, because when I look at you, I see home." He took a step closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "And I do not care about money or property, Miss Kane. I care about you." She reached out before she could stop herself and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, strong and sure, and she felt something settle into place inside her chest. "When this is over," she whispered, "I would very much like to be courted by you, Sebastian Ashford." He raised her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Then let us make sure tomorrow goes according to plan." The wedding day dawned clear and bright, the September sun already warm by mid-morning. Olivia dressed in the simple cream-colored dress she had chosen for the ceremony, her hands surprisingly steady as Charlotte helped with the buttons. She felt focused, determined. Today she would take back control of her life. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon at the small church at the edge of town. Marcus had wanted something quick and private, which now made perfect sense. Fewer witnesses to his crime. But when Olivia arrived at the church, she was pleased to see it was not nearly as empty as Marcus had probably hoped. Sheriff Dawson sat in the back pew, along with Sebastian and his 2 ranch hand friends. Several townspeople who had known her father had also come, drawn by curiosity or genuine affection for the Kane family. Marcus was waiting at the altar, looking irritated by the unexpected crowd but maintaining his pleasant facade. He smiled when he saw Olivia, but she noticed his eyes were cold. Reverend Walsh began the ceremony, his sonorous voice echoing in the small space. Olivia went through the motions mechanically, waiting for the crucial moment. Sebastian had advised her to let Marcus get almost to the end, to let him think he had won, before springing the trap. They reached the part where the Reverend asked if anyone objected to the union. Olivia held her breath. "I object," Sebastian said, standing up from his pew. Marcus's head whipped around, his expression furious. "Who are you? This is a private ceremony." "Sebastian Ashford, foreman at Silver Canyon Ranch." Sebastian walked down the aisle, his hand resting casually on his gun. "And I object because this woman is about to marry a con man who plans to rob her blind." The church erupted in shocked murmurs. Marcus's face went through a series of expressions, settling on righteous indignation. "That is absurd. I love Olivia. This man is clearly insane." "Am I?" Sebastian reached the front of the church. "Then explain why there is no record of you owning any mining claims in Virginia City. Why the bank has never heard of you. Why there is a warrant out for a man matching your description in California for fraud." Marcus turned to Olivia, his voice syrupy with false concern. "Darling, you cannot believe this nonsense. He is clearly jealous, trying to ruin our happiness." This was her moment. Olivia looked at the man she had almost married and felt nothing but contempt. "I believe him because I sent the telegrams myself. I know you are a liar and a thief, and this wedding is over." For just a second, Marcus's mask slipped, and she saw the cold calculation beneath. Then he lunged, grabbing her arm hard enough to bruise. "You stupid girl! You think you can humiliate me like this? I will ruin you." Sebastian moved fast, grabbing Marcus's wrist and twisting until he released Olivia with a cry of pain. "Touch her again and I will break your arm." Sheriff Dawson was already moving forward, hand on his weapon. "Marcus Holloway, or whatever your real name is, you are under arrest. We will sort out exactly which crimes to charge you with after we contact the authorities in California." Marcus tried to run, but Sebastian and the other ranch hands blocked the exits. Within moments, the sheriff had him in handcuffs, still protesting his innocence even as they dragged him out of the church. Olivia stood at the altar, shaking with reaction. Charlotte ran to her, wrapping her arms around her sister. "It is over, Livy. You are safe." She looked past Charlotte to where Sebastian stood and found him watching her with such tenderness that her breath caught. He had saved her. This relative stranger had risked his reputation, and possibly his safety to protect her from a man who would have destroyed her life. The townspeople began filing out, some stopping to squeeze her hand or murmur words of support. Reverend Walsh looked thoroughly bewildered but patted her shoulder kindly before departing to help the sheriff with the paperwork. Finally, only Olivia, Charlotte, and Sebastian remained in the quiet church. "Thank you," Olivia said, her voice breaking. "I do not know how to repay you for what you have done." Sebastian crossed the space between them and took both her hands in his. "You do not owe me anything, Olivia. I only did what anyone decent would have done." That is not true, and you know it. Most men would have looked the other way. She squeezed his fingers. You saved me, Sebastian. In every way a person can be saved. Then let me keep saving you, he said softly. Let me court you and care for you and show you what it means to be loved by someone who wants nothing from you except your happiness. Charlotte made a small sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. I am going to wait outside and give you two some privacy. Try not to cause a scandal in the church, please. When she was gone, Olivia looked up at Sebastian and felt her heart expand with something bright and terrifying and wonderful. I am afraid, she admitted. I trusted Marcus, and look how that turned out. How do I know I can trust my own judgment? You cannot know. Not for certain. Sebastian lifted one hand to cup her cheek, his touch infinitely gentle. But I can promise you this. I will spend every day proving I am worthy of your trust. I will be patient while you learn to believe in me. And I will never, ever give you reason to doubt my intentions. That is the best I can offer. She leaned into his palm, letting herself absorb his warmth and strength. What if I am too damaged, too cynical to be the kind of woman you deserve? Then we will be cynical together. And slowly, day by day, we will learn to hope again. He smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something almost beautiful. I am a patient man, Olivia Kane, and you are worth waiting for. She rose on her toes and kissed him, a soft brush of lips that sent sparks shooting through her entire body. He made a low sound in his throat and pulled her closer, deepening the kiss until she was dizzy with it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. I have been wanting to do that since I first saw you. Then you should have knocked me over sooner, she said, and laughed at his startled expression. They walked out of the church together into the golden afternoon sunshine, and Olivia felt lighter than she had in years. The weight of her father's failed dreams, the burden of trying to save everything alone, the suffocating fear of the future, all of it seemed to lift and drift away on the desert breeze. In the weeks that followed, Sebastian courted her with a sincerity that made her previous relationship look like the cheap fraud it was. He brought her wildflowers picked from the hills around the ranch, not expensive hothouse roses. He helped Charlotte repair the fence around their small garden without being asked. He sat with Olivia on the porch in the evenings and talked about everything and nothing, sharing his dreams and listening to hers with genuine interest. He kissed her goodnight with sweet restraint that left her wanting more, and he never once asked about her finances or what assets remained in her name. Marcus Holloway, whose real name turned out to be Martin Hendricks, was extradited to California to face charges for defrauding the Sacramento widow. The evidence was overwhelming, and he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Olivia felt nothing but relief when she received the news. By November, when the weather turned cold and the mountains were dusted with early snow, Olivia knew without doubt that she loved Sebastian Ashford. She loved his quiet strength, his gentle humor, the way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. She loved how he treated Charlotte like a beloved sister, and how he never made her feel weak for needing help. He proposed on Thanksgiving Day, kneeling in her small parlor with a simple gold band he had saved 3 months' wages to buy. I know I do not have much to offer you yet, he said, his voice rough with emotion. But I promise to work hard and build a good life for us. Say yes, Olivia. Say you will let me love you for the rest of my life. She pulled him to his feet and kissed him until they were both laughing and breathless. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. They were married in January of 1882 in the same church where her first wedding had fallen apart, but this time everything was different. This time, the groom looked at her with tears in his eyes as she walked down the aisle. This time, The vows were spoken with fierce conviction. This time, when the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was full of promise and hope, and a love so bright it seemed to illuminate the entire room. Sebastian had been right when he said he did not have much to offer financially, but what he gave her was infinitely more valuable. He gave her partnership, respect, genuine affection, and a steady presence that made her feel safe for the first time since her parents died. Together, they worked to restore what they could of her father's ranch, combining it with Sebastian's savings to purchase a small herd of cattle. Charlotte lived with them for the first 2 years, helping with the house and garden, but eventually she met a young teacher named Peter who had moved to Hawthorne from Utah. They courted properly, with Sebastian standing as protective as any brother, and married in the spring of 1884. Olivia cried happy tears at the ceremony, watching her sister pledge herself to a man who clearly adored her. With Charlotte settled in her own home in town, Olivia and Sebastian had the ranch house to themselves. They worked hard during the days, building their operations slowly but surely, and in the evenings they sat together on the porch they had rebuilt and talked about their dreams. "I want children," Olivia told him one night in late summer, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and amber. "I want to fill this house with the sound of laughter and running feet." Sebastian wrapped his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. "Then that is what we will do, as many as you want. You might regret saying that when we have 5 little ones underfoot," she teased. "Never." He kissed her temple. "Every child we have will be a blessing, a piece of this love we have built together." Their first son, Samuel, was born in the spring of 1885, a red-faced, lusty-voiced infant who looked exactly like his father. Sebastian held him with such tender wonder that Olivia fell in love with her husband all over again. He was a devoted father, getting up for night feedings and changing diapers without complaint, singing lullabies in his rough voice until Samuel fell asleep against his chest. Their second child, a daughter they named Rose, arrived 2 years later. She was calmer than her brother, with Olivia's dark hair and Sebastian's sage green eyes. Sebastian declared her the most beautiful baby ever born, and Olivia could not argue. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily. They would never be wealthy, but they made enough to live comfortably and put a little aside each year. Sebastian proved to be an excellent rancher, with a knack for handling cattle and a reputation for honesty that brought him respect from their neighbors. Olivia managed the household accounts and discovered she had inherited her father's head for business, making smart decisions that helped them weather the inevitable lean years. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Sebastian took her into town for dinner at the hotel restaurant, the same place where she had sat across from Marcus Holloway and seen her future crumbling. But tonight, looking at her husband's face in the candlelight, she felt only gratitude for how everything had worked out. "You ever regret it?" Sebastian asked suddenly. "Marrying a poor cowboy instead of someone with money and prospects?" She reached across the table and took his hand. "I regret that I almost married Marcus. I regret that I was so desperate for security that I nearly sold my soul for it. But I have never, not for one single second, regretted you. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Sebastian Ashford. You and our children are my security, my prosperity, my everything." His eyes shone suspiciously bright in the flickering light. "I love you, Olivia, more than I ever thought it possible to love another person. I love you too. And I think," she added with a smile, "that we should go home and see if we can give Samuel and Rose a little brother or sister." He laughed, that deep, rich sound she had learned to cherish, and kissed her hand. "I like the way you think, Mrs. Ashford." They left the restaurant and drove home under a sky full of stars, the desert air cool and sweet with the scent of sage. Their children were safely asleep at Charlotte's house for the night, giving them rare privacy. Sebastian carried her over the threshold as if they were newlyweds again, and they made love with the easy passion of two people who knew each other's bodies as well as they knew their own hearts. Afterward, lying tangled together in their bed, Olivia traced patterns on Sebastian's chest and thought about the telegram that had arrived 5 years ago, promising her a future with a man who turned out to be a lie. At the time, she had thought that telegram was her salvation. Now she knew better. Her salvation had come in the form of a stranger on horseback who had cared enough to warn her, who had seen her value when she could barely see it herself, who had loved her not for what she could give him but for who she was. "What are you thinking about?" Sebastian asked sleepily, his hand stroking her hair. "How lucky I am, how grateful." She pressed a kiss to his shoulder. "How glad I am that you knocked me over that day on the street corner." "I did not knock you over, I merely startled you." "Semantics." She smiled against his skin. "The point is, you appeared in my life exactly when I needed you most, and you stayed." "Of course I stayed. You are my home, Olivia. Where else would I go?" She had no answer for that except to hold him tighter, to pour all her love into the embrace. Outside, the wind whispered across the desert, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow. There would be challenges ahead, she knew. Years of drought or hard winters, children who would need raising and guiding, the 1,000 small struggles that made up a life. But they would face it all together, this cowboy who had saved her and this woman who had learned to save herself. Their third child, another son they named Daniel, was born the following spring. He had his mother's stubborn chin and his father's calm temperament, a good combination that would serve him well. By then, the ranch was thriving, their small herd grown to a respectable size, and they had even hired 2 hands to help with the work. Charlotte and Peter had their first baby around the same time, a daughter named Lucy. The sisters delighted in raising their children together, gathering for Sunday dinners where the house rang with laughter and chaos and love. Sebastian and Peter became fast friends, often sitting on the porch with whiskey and cigars while the women cleaned up after meals, trading stories and solving the problems of the world. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Samuel proved to have his father's way with horses and could often be found in the barn, talking to the animals like they were his best friends. Rose was quieter, more studious, learning to read almost before she could walk properly. Daniel was the wild one, always getting into mischief, keeping his parents on their toes. When Samuel turned 10, he asked his father how he and Mama had met. Sebastian glanced at Olivia, who nodded slightly, and told an edited version of the story. He talked about seeing a beautiful woman and knowing immediately that she was special, about working up the courage to introduce himself, about courtship and love, and choosing to build a life together. He did not mention Marcus Holloway or the near disaster that had brought them together. Those details could wait until the children were older, until they could understand the complexity of how sometimes the worst moments in life led to the best outcomes. Years passed, bringing change and constancy in equal measure. The children grew tall and strong, each developing their own personality and dreams. Samuel talked about becoming a veterinarian, fascinated by animal medicine. Rose wanted to be a teacher like her Uncle Peter. Daniel could not decide between being a rancher like his father or a sheriff like the now retired Mr. Dawson. Olivia and Sebastian grew older together, their love deepening with time like a well-aged wine. They added a 4th child to their family, a surprise daughter born when Olivia was 38. They named her Grace, and she was doted on by her older siblings, spoiled terribly and loved beyond measure. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Sebastian took Olivia back to the church where they had married. It was late afternoon, the lights slanting through the windows in golden bars, illuminating the simple wooden pews. "You remember standing here?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "20 years ago, making promises we barely understood." "I understood them," Olivia said softly. "Maybe not fully, not with the wisdom of 20 years of marriage, but I knew what I was promising. To love you, to build a life with you, to face whatever came together. And we did it." Sebastian turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face with infinite tenderness. "Through drought and prosperity, through difficult births and childhood illnesses, through every challenge and joy, we did it together. You are still the best thing that ever happened to me, Olivia Ashford. The reason I wake up grateful every single morning." She felt tears slide down her cheeks, the good kind that came from being overwhelmed with happiness. "I love you so much. Sometimes I look at our life, at our beautiful children and our home, and I cannot believe it is real. That I get to have this, that I get to have you. You deserve every bit of it. You deserve the world." He kissed her softly, sweetly, a kiss that held 2 decades of devotion. "And I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you know it." They renewed their vows that day, with just Reverend Walsh as witness. The words were the same as 20 years before, but they meant so much more now, weighted with the knowledge of what they had built together. When they walked out of the church hand in hand, Olivia felt as young and hopeful as she had on their wedding day, but with the added gift of knowing exactly what those hopes would become. Their children married and had children of their own. Samuel indeed became a veterinarian, studying in Carson City, before returning to Hawthorne to open a practice. Rose married a rancher from the next county over and taught school until her own children came along. Daniel chose to be a lawman, following in Sheriff Dawson's footsteps, and made his parents proud with his dedication to justice and fairness. Grace, the baby, surprised everyone by becoming a journalist, traveling to San Francisco to work for a newspaper before eventually returning home to document the changing face of the West. Through it all, Olivia and Sebastian remained the center of their growing family, the foundation on which everything else was built. They sat on their porch in the evenings, now gray-haired and lined with age but still holding hands, still finding new things to talk about after decades of conversation. "You ever think about what would have happened if I had married Marcus?" Olivia asked one evening, watching the sunset paint the familiar mountains in shades of rose and lavender. "If you had not warned me," Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. "Sometimes, and it terrifies me, not just because he would have hurt you, though that is terrible enough, but because I would have lost the chance to love you, to have this life with you. That alternate reality is the stuff of nightmares. Mine too." She squeezed his hand. "But it did not happen. You saved me from him, and more importantly, you showed me what real love looks like. You gave me everything I needed to save myself." "We saved each other," Sebastian corrected gently. "I was drifting before I met you, Olivia. No purpose, no real home. You gave me a reason to stay in one place, to put down roots, to believe in something beyond the next job or the next town. We built this together." She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the familiar strength of him, and smiled. "We did not we, built something pretty spectacular. The most spectacular thing I have ever been part of," he agreed. Their grandchildren played in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Inside the house, she could hear Rose helping Grace prepare dinner, their voices mingling with the clatter of pots and pans. Samuel was in the barn with his eldest son, teaching him the finer points of horse care. Daniel was due to arrive any moment with his family, driving out from town after his shift. This was what she had dreamed of all those years ago, though she had not known how to name it then. Not just security or survival, but love and family and belonging. A house full of people who cared for each other. A legacy built on honesty and hard work and devotion. She had come so close to losing it all, to tying herself to a man who would have destroyed her. But fate, or providence, or simple blind luck had sent Sebastian Ashford into her path at exactly the right moment. He had seen her value when she could not, had fought for her when she barely had the strength to fight for herself, and had loved her with a constancy that never wavered. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what? For knocking me over on that street corner. For being brave enough to tell me the truth when it would have been easier to walk away. For choosing me every single day for the past 40 years. Sebastian turned and kissed her temple, his lips warm against her skin. "Choosing you was the easiest thing I have ever done, Olivia. Loving you is as natural as breathing, and I will keep choosing you, keep loving you for whatever time we have left. Forever then," she said firmly. "We have forever." He laughed, that same deep, warm sound that had comforted her through countless days and nights. Forever sounds about right. As the sun dipped below the mountains and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Olivia Ashford sat on the porch of her home with her husband beside her, her children and grandchildren surrounding her, and felt a peace so profound, it seemed to fill her entire being. She had survived betrayal and heartbreak, had clawed her way back from the edge of ruin, and had found something she never thought possible. She had found love. Real, honest, transformative love. The kind that lasted through seasons and years and lifetimes. The kind that built something enduring and beautiful from the ashes of almost disaster. And as Sebastian's hand tightened around hers, and the sounds of her family filled the air around them, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that every struggle, every fear, every moment of doubt had been worth it. Because it had all led her here, to this perfect moment, to this beautiful life, to home.